17 pages could take, I don't know, let's see, it was a bright cold day in April and the clouds were striking 13. So already you have the symbolism. You want 13 on the clock. You got Terranigma. Terranigma Ligma. What the hell is Sigma? To describe someone who's not quite bored, we made up another word. Alright. Sigma 6. I better be getting checks from there after all these years. What'd you do? Just copy my efficiency? Put a brand on it? Kick me in the butt further. So that's one sentence in there. Terranigma, Ligma, what the hell is Sigma? Bright cold day in April. So, welcome to error message 4 days of April Fools. Alright. Isn't it? Yeah, April 4th. I have not read it. I have had it read to me. And I've done the audiobook 3 or 4 times while just edibled out. No. Can we buy 2 copies of every book? Because it seems like whenever you eat your books, like, you clearly have dinner or dessert on your fingers. Sanctuary had chocolate all over it. Tesla had chocolate all over it. Sometimes I think there's chicken mole all over whatever you read. You're gonna need an entire forensics department to figure out what the heck. Like, do the girls ever wash their hands when they read books? tattoos. Was gonna get a Ruthless Burger wristwatch that goes up to 13. Have it signed by Big Ben, like my Brett Favre watch. Like Brett Favre put his little tiny autographer. This watch has been signed by Brett Favre. Isn't it awesome? It was a bright cold day in April when the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast into an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. That, with Child of Light, the difference between Elfstone and Child of Light is there's way too much like high school emotions being written about, and like all the descriptive, all the words that usually describe the setting in Brooks's books is like missing for two dorks in love with each other who happen to be brother and sister as well. It's like, this is tedious. I'm sure it gets better. I am not sure it gets better. Do we want anything else from that paragraph? We got all our WS's lined up. We got new WS's every day. Victory Mansions, glass doors. Yeah, you would chop this up still though. So, chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind. So you're going Chilly Willy. Chilly Willy, bundle up. Even just the phrase vile wind. You can go with that. And then, was it a proper noun of a place? Victory Mansions. Victory Mansions and the glass doors. Subsidized heating bill we'd like to explore, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. I got sand in my mouth. We got a swirl of sand in mouth. This can be funny to you however you please. I do not want to over-explain anything. If it's not making me or Zach laugh, I do not care. I just do not care. Alright. So that's paragraph 1. TGH 1. Blatantly rigged for the old, disgusting, haggard midget. Alright. She can take off with David. There's still states I haven't been to. always smelt the boiled cabbage and old rag mats. He wants to talk to people who have lived in an apartment before. So you got them engines with the dots on their heads making everybody smell like inside their boiled brains are falling out their head. Always smell the boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of it, a colored poster too large for indoor display had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a meter wide. Freestyle time and freestyle unit conversion. I've already seen your boring dictionary freestyles. Free, give me that metric union. Give me that metric union unit conversion. No, that doesn't exist, and no boy has ever heard of it. Do not waste that on a girl, boys. If it if it manages to make sense, just be like, no, I'm gonna eat my own fingernails. I always smell the boiled cabbage, old rag mats at the end of it, a colored poster too large for indoor display had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a meter wide, the face of a man of about 45, with a heavy black mustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying to lift. Even the best of times it was seldom working at present. The electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. Alright, the second paragraph. He's trying to pack it with everything you're going to see day in, day out. The moment you get home from work, you're reminded. So what do we got? You're reminded of the smell of cabbage and old rag mats. Apparently, you live in a two-story mud hut in Thailand. Let's see, depict similar. Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39, had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle. Who was 39 and went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing, opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. Big Brother is watching you. The caption read beneath it ran. The caption beneath it ran. Boom, 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 boom. Alright. Your name is no longer Danielle. Your name is It Ran. will take one photo and someone will write the caption beneath. It ran, formerly known as Danielle. The caption beneath. She's a gymnast, so she probably has ugly feet. Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from an oblong metal plaque like a dull mirror which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. Winston turned a switch and the voice sank somewhat, though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen, it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagerness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls which were the uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face naturally sanguine, and his skin roughened up by coarse soap and blunt razor blades and the cold of the winter that had just ended. Outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down on the street, little eddies of wind were whirling dust and torn paper into spirals, and though the sun was shining in the sky a harsh blue, there seemed to be no color in anything, except the posters that were plastered everywhere. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. There was one on the house front immediately opposite. Big Brother is watching you, the caption said. While the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Well, yeah. You gotta give her something to think about in that chair since she wanted me to say hi. Yeah, can you imagine causing all the girls to be punished with the silent treatment because you're too terrified, dumb hot girl? Alright, so while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. While the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. While the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Big Brother's watching you, the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Down at street level, another poster torn at one corner flapped fitfully in the wind, alternately covering and uncovering the single word Ingsoc. Let's see. In the far distance, a helicopter skimmed down between the roofs. I guess hoofs, hovered for an instant like a blue bottle and darted away again with the curving flight. It was the police patrol snooping into people's windows. The patrols did not matter, however, only the thought police mattered. Forget what page do they explain Ingsoc. Ingsoc is a bit of a piggyback the last couple weeks. But I haven't kept track of anything. Like, that's for you guys to keep track of. I don't have time. Nobody believed me for the longest time, and then everyone's like, oh, we believe you. It's like, I'm not in the habit of keeping my own notes anymore. Why keep my own notes if I'm constantly pointed finger, the liar? It's like, whatever. It's like the weight of making up lost time and all that is on someone else, not me. In the far distance, thought police behind Winston's back, the voice from the telescreen was still babbling away about pig iron and the overfulfillment of the ninth 3-year plan. The telescreen received and transmitted simultaneously any sound Winston made above the level of a very low whisper, which would be picked up by it, low whisper would be picked up by it. I'm like, this is a speed. This book is a speed reader's nightmare because you're grabbing like we're grabbing all the other W words in this like small circle just by scanning. Transmitted simultaneously any sound that Winston made above the level of a very low whisper. And my glasses are crooked. Whisper would be picked up by it. By a very low whisper would be picked up by it. Moreover, so long as he remained within the field of vision which the metal plaque commanded, he could be seen as well as heard. There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment, how often, or on what system the thought police plugged in on any individual wire, as any individual wire was guesswork. 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 And then keep the next line guesswork until you have a chance to look at it later. All the freebies are drying up. Behind Winston's back, the voice of the telescreen was still babbling away. Plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork. It was even conceivable that they watched everybody all the time, but at any rate, they could plug in your wire whenever they wanted to. You had to did live from habit that became instinct to the assumption that every sound you made was overheard. And except in darkness, every movement scrutinized. Every sound you made, every breath you bake, every movement, hey, never be my babe. Every movement scrutinized, so every sound you made, every movement, every sound, no, every movement scrutinized somehow, every movement scrutinized. Yeah, what were you guys learning while I was actually learning how to play two instruments and sing and write? Oh, okay. You had the joy of going to college without being forced to get a vaccination. All right. Alright, every movement scrutinized. Winston kept his back turned to the telescreen. It was safer though, as he well knew, even a back can be revealing. A kilometer away from kilometer away, the Ministry of Truth, his place of work, tower vast and wide above the grimy landscape, as he thought, with a sort of vague distaste. This was London, chief city of Airstrip 1 itself, third most populous of the provinces of Oceania. O'Shea tried to squeeze out some childhood memory that should tell him whether London had always been quite like this. Were there always these vistas of rotting 19th century houses, their sides shored up, their roofs with corrugated iron, their crazy garden walls sagging in all directions? Sagging in all directions, boys are seeking erections. That's the way, the truth, the matter of the hip-hop culture they gay. Who wants to sing that line? Amateurs. Sagging in all directions. You can't be a thug unless you like other boys' erections. Thugs like other boys' erections. Sagging in all directions. Yeah. You can't throw Diddy in jail. He's our only hope. Frickin' creeps. Sagging in all directions. Like, pull your pants up. Like, yeah, what's sagging? Like, is it white flag massa behavior? I don't want to touch that. I ain't touching that. I'll mention it. I'll be like, I've been noticing some behavior. Like, what do we need to see your booty for? Like, insecure, except in terms of, well, advertising to other men. That's the only time you're pretty confident. Oh, that's a skill. And the bomb sites where the plaster dust swirled up in the air and the willow herbs straggled over the heaps of rubble and the places where the bombs had cleared. Let's see. Straggled the heaps of rubble and the bomb sites where the plaster dust swirled in the air. I thought there might have been a rhyme up there, but it was just air. In the places where the bombs had cleared a larger patch in there and sprung up sorted colonies of wooden dwellings like chicken houses. Wooden dwellings like chicken houses. Don't forget sometimes to enunciate properly with a question mark. Wooden dwellings like chicken houses? I don't know, but it was no use. He could not remember. Nothing remained of his childhood except a suit. I don't think the guy even reading it sounded like it was a question. And there had sprung up sorted colonies of wooden dwellings like chicken houses? I don't know. Yeah, say that one a million times. Wooden dwellings like chicken houses? I don't know, I'm just Winston. But it was no use. He could not remember. Nothing remained of his childhood except a series of bright lit tableaux occurring against no background and mostly unintelligible. The mystery of truth, many true in newspeak, was startlingly different from any other object in sight. It was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete, soaring up terrace after terrace, 300 meters into the air. 300 meters would be what? 900 yards, or nearly 10 football fields, soaring up terrace after terrace from Where Winston stood, it was just possible to read, picked out on its white face in elegant lettering, the three slogans of the party: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. You would probably do something. I don't know what to, like, I think the girl's like 84 way too much, so I'm not sure how much you would probably go full mantra with the slogans of the party. So go war to strength. Give it a melodic yank. War to strength, yank. In the throat, shoot a trank. Yeah. Yank her out the zoo, she will thank. Oh gosh, let's see. Where's my rescue anthropomorphic girlfriend? The Ministry of Truth contained, it was said, 3,000 rooms above ground level and corresponding ramifications below. Scattered about London, there were just 3 other buildings of similar appearance and size, so completely did they dwarf surrounding architecture that from the roof of Victory mansions you could see all 4 of them simultaneously. They were the homes of the 4 ministries between which the entire apparatus of government was divided. The Ministry of Truth, which concerned itself with news, entertainment, education, and the fine arts; the Ministry of Peace, which concerned itself with war; the Ministry of Love, which maintained law and order; and the Ministry of Plenty, which was responsible for economic affairs. Their names in newspeak: many true, many packs, many love, many plenty. The Ministry of Love was the really frightening one. There were no windows in it at all. Winston had never been inside the Ministry of Love, nor within half a kilometer of it. It was a place impossible to enter except on official business, and then only by penetrating through a maze of barbed wire entanglements. It's the reverse corkscrew. Steel doors and hidden machine gun nests. Talk dirty while reading this, and this is just your test. Even the streets leading up to its outer barriers were roamed by gorilla-faced guards in black uniforms, armed with jointed truncheons. Winston turned round abruptly. He had set his features into the expression of quiet optimism, which it was advisable to wear when facing the telescreen. He crossed the room into the tiny kitchen. By leaving the ministry at this time of day, he had sacrificed his lunch in the canteen, and he was aware that there was no food in the kitchen except a hunk of dark-colored bread, which had got to be saved for tomorrow's breakfast. He took down from the shelf a bottle of colorless liquid with a plain white label marked Victory Gin. It gave off a sticky, oily smell as of Chinese rice spirit. Winston poured out nearly a teacup full, nerved himself for a shock, and gulped it down like a dose of medicine. Instantly his face turned scarlet, and the water ran out of his eyes. The stuff was like nitric acid, and moreover, in swallowing it, one had the sensation of being hit on the back of the head with a rubber club. The next moment, however, the burning in his belly died down, and the world began to look more cheerful. He took a cigarette from a crumpled packet marked Victory Cigarettes. Ooh, we should start smoking again. We've only quit it for like 12 hours. Victory Cigarettes. And incautiously held it upright, whereupon the tobacco fell out onto the floor. With the next, he was more successful. He went back to the living room and sat down at a small table that stood to the left of the telescreen. From the table drawer, he took out a pen holder, a bottle of ink, and a thick quarto-sized blank book with the red quarto-sized blank book with the red back and a marbled cover. Put this on your bingo card where you're describing your girl. A thick, isn't this a musical term? Quarto sized blank book with a red back and a marbled cover. For some reason, the telescreen in the living room was in an unusual position. Instead of being placed, as was normal, in the end wall, where it could command the whole room, it was in a longer wall opposite the window. To one side of it, there was a shallow alcove in which Winston was now sitting, in which, when the flats were built, had probably been intended to hold bookshelves. By sitting in the alcove and keeping well back, Winston was able to remain outside the range of the telescreen so far as sight went. He could be heard, of course, but so long as he stayed in his present position, he could not be seen. It was partly the unusual geography of the room that had suggested to him the thing that he was now about to do. Let's see, it was partly the unusual geography of the room that had suggested to him that the thing that he was now about to do. The geography of where the microwave had been replaced by a TV gave him a suggestion to utilize the ceiling fan for the official tossing of the football koozie, but it had also been suggested by the book that he had just taken out of the drawer. It was a peculiarly beautiful book. Its smooth, creamy paper, a little yellowed by age. Alright. There could be like 2-3 layers on the bingo card. So it starts on page 7. From the table drawer, he took out a pen holder, so a thick quarto-sized book with a red back and a marble cover. And then the next layer is it's smooth, creamy paper. It was a peculiarly beautiful book. Peculiarly beautiful book. It's smooth, creamy paper, a little yellowed by age, was of a kind that had not been manufactured for at least 40 years past. 40 years, you could have fooled me. He could guess, however, that the book was much older than that. He had seen it lying in the window of a frowsy little junk shop in a slummy quarter of town. Just what quarter he did not now remember, and had been stricken immediately by the overwhelming desire to possess it. Party members were supposed not to go into ordinary shops dealing on the free market, it was called. But the rule was not strictly kept, because there were various things, such as the shoelaces and razor blades, which it was impossible to get a hold of in any other way. He had given a quick glance up and down the street, and then had slipped inside and bought the book for $2.50. At the time, he was not conscious of wanting it for any particular reason, not wanting it for any particular purpose. He had carried it guiltily home in his briefcase, even with nothing written in it. It was a compromising possession. The thing that he was about to do was to open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal since there were no longer any laws, but if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death, or at least by 25 years in a forced labor camp. Winston fitted a nib into the pen holder and sucked it to get the grease off. The pen was an archaic instrument, seldom used even for signatures, and he had procured one furtively and with some difficulty, simply because of a feeling that the beautiful, creamy paper deserved to be written on with a real nib, instead of being scratched with an ink pencil. Said in an Eeyore voice. Because of a feeling, simply because of a feeling. Simply because of a feeling, where's the thing? Simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper, simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper deserved to be written on with a real nib instead of being deserved to be written on with a real nib instead of ink pencil. Where's the deserved to be written on? I'm writing all of your consent letters for your tattoos. Yeah, just get some Roy Orbison on your butt cheek and call it a day. Simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper deserved to be written on. Deserved to be written on. To be written on with a real nib. A real nib instead of being. Real nib written on with a needle instead of a pen. Actually, he was not used to writing by hand. Apart from very short notes, it was usual to dictate everything into the speakwrite, which was, of course, impossible for his present purpose. He dipped the pen into the ink and then faltered for just a second. A tremor had gone through his bowels. To mark the paper was the decisive act. In small, clumsy letters, he wrote April 4th, 1984. He sat back. A sense of complete helplessness had descended upon him. To begin with, he did not know with any certainty that this was 1984. It must be round about that date, since he was fairly sure that his age was 39, and he believed that he had been born in 1944 or 1945, but it was never possible nowadays to pin down any date within a year or two. For whom it suddenly occurred to him to wonder, was he writing this diary for the future, for the unborn? His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page. His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page. Where was this? His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page. Hovered for a moment. That one's probably meat right there. You could probably cook on that for a bit. His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page. Round the doubtful date on the page. This was written at a time where you don't have to put an apostrophe to omit the A in around and round it down. Round for a moment, round the doubtful date on the page, round the doubtful date. Then fetched up with a bump against the newspeak word doublethink for the first time the magnitude of what he had. What's that? Doubtful date on the page. Mine hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the page. Then he meanders and I'm trying to figure out, can we stay on that before fetched up on the, and then fetched up with a bump against the newspeak word doublethink for the first time the magnitude of what he had undertaken came home to him. How could you communicate with the future? It was of its nature impossible. There's like, yeah, tie this sentence in with Augustine's Confessions and the existence of time. It was of its nature impossible. Either the future would resemble the present, in which case it would not listen to him, or it would be different from it, and his predicament would be meaningless. For some time he sat gazing stupidly at the paper. Of course he did. For some time he sat gazing stupidly. Stupidly at the paper. The telescreen had changed over to strident military music. It was curious that he seemed not merely to have lost the power of expressing himself, but even to have forgotten what it was that he had originally intended to say. Yeah, right. Clowns. For weeks past he had been making ready for this moment, and it had never crossed his mind that anything would be needed except courage. The actual writing would be easy. All he had to do was transfer the paper, the interminable, restless monologue that had been running inside his head, hidden behind a giant mound of guts, literally for years. At this moment, however, even the monologue had dried up. Moreover, the varicose ulcer had been itching unbearably. He dared not scratch it, because if he did so, it always became inflamed. Seconds were ticking by. He was conscious of nothing except the blankness of the page in front of him, the itching of the skin above his ankle, the blaring of the music, and a slight booziness caused by the gin. He was conscious of nothing except these lots of things. Suddenly he began writing in sheer panic, only imperfectly aware of what he was setting down. His small but childish handwriting straggled up and down the page, shedding first its capital letters and then finally even its full stops. April 4th, 1984. Last night to the flicks, all war films, one very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience much amused by shots of a great huge fat man trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along. This is actually funny with the trade rumors and the guy trying to go to Greece. Oh man. Let's see. Audience much amused by shots of a great huge fat man trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along in the water like a porpoise. Then you saw him through the helicopter's gun sights. Then he was full of holes, and the sea round him turned pink, and he sank as suddenly as though the holes had let it in the water. Winston's default is round instead of around. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Audience shouting with laughter when he sank. Then he saw a lifeboat full of children with a helicopter hovering over it. It was a middle-aged woman, might have been a Jewess, sitting up on the bow with a little boy about 3 years old, in her arms. The little boy, screaming with fright and hiding his head between her breasts as if he was trying to burrow right into her, and the woman putting her arms around him and comforting him, although she was blue with fright herself. All the time covering him up as much as possible, as if she thought her arms could keep the bullets off of him. Then the helicopter planted a 20-kilo bomb in among them. Terrific flash, and the boat went all to matchwood. And there was a wonderful shot of a child's arm going up, 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 right into the air. Was it Tools? What do you call it? What's the one? On 10,000 Days? I like to watch things die. Let's see. Terrific flash, child's arm go up, up, right into the air. A helicopter with a camera in its nose must have followed it up, and there was a lot of applause from the party seats, but a woman down in the prole part of the house suddenly started kicking up a fuss and shouting. They didn't oughter have showed it in front of the kids. They didn't, it ain't right. Not in front of the kids. It ain't until the police turned her out. I don't suppose anything happened to her. Nobody cares what the proles say. Typical prole reaction. They never. Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from a cramp. He did not know what made him pour out this stream of rubbish, but the curious thing was that while he was doing so, a total different memory had clarified itself in his mind, to the point where he almost felt equal to writing it down. He now realized, because of this other incident, that he had suddenly decided to come home and begin the diary today. It had happened that morning at the ministry. If anything so nebulous could be said to happen, it was nearly 1100, and in the records department where Winston worked, they were dragging the chairs out of the cubicles and grouping them in the center of the hall, opposite to the big telescreen, in preparation for the 2 minutes 8. Winston was just taking his place in one of the middle rows when two people whom he knew by sight had never spoken to, came unexpectedly into the room. One of them was a girl whom he often passed in the corridors. He did not know her name, but he knew that she also worked in the fiction department, presumably since he had sometimes seen her with oily hands and carrying a spanner. She had some mechanical job on one of the novel writing machines. She was a bold-looking girl of about 27, with thick, dark hair, a freckled face, and swift, athletic movements. A narrow scarlet sash, emblem of the Junior Anti-Sex League, was wound several times around the waist of her overalls, just tightly enough to bring out the shapeliness of her hips. Winston had disliked her from the very first moment of seeing her. He knew the reason. It was because of the atmosphere of the hockey fields and cold baths and community hikes and general clean-mindedness which she managed to carry about with her. He disliked nearly all women, especially the young and pretty ones. It was always the women, and above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies and nosers out of unorthodoxy. But this particular girl gave him the impression of being more dangerous than most. Once, when they passed in the corridor, she had given him a quick sidelong glance which seemed to pierce right into him, and for a moment had filled him with black terror. The idea that even crossed his mind that she might be an agent of the thought police. That, it was true, was very unlikely. Still, he continued to feel a particular uneasiness which had fear mixed up in it as well as hostility whenever she was anywhere near him. The other person was named O'Brien, a member of the inner party, and holder of some post so important and remote that Winston had only a dim idea of its nature. A momentary hush passed over the group of people round the chairs as they saw the black overalls of the inner party member approaching. O'Brien was a large, burly man with thick neck and a coarse, humorous, brutal face. In spite of his formidable appearance, he had a certain charm of manner. He had a trick of resettling his spectacles on his nose, which was curiously disarming, in some indefinable way, curiously civilized. It was a gesture which, if anyone still thought in such terms, might have recalled an 18th century nobleman offering his snuff box. Winston had seen O'Brien perhaps a dozen times, and almost a dozen times in almost as many years. He felt deeply drawn to him, and not solely because he was intrigued by the contrast between O'Brien's urbane nature and his prizefighter's physique. Much more was because of a secretly held belief, or perhaps not even a belief, merely a hope, that O'Brien's political orthodoxy was not perfect. Something in his face suggested it irresistibly, and again perhaps it was not even unorthodoxy that was written in his face, but simply intelligence. But at any rate, he had the appearance of being a person that you could talk to if somehow you could cheat the telescreen and get him alone. Winston had never made the smallest effort to verify this guess. Indeed, there was no way of doing so. At this moment, O'Brien glanced at his wristwatch, saw that it was nearly 1100, and evidently decided to stay in the records department until the 2 minutes hate was over. He took a chair in the same row as Winston, a couple places away. A small, sandy-haired woman who worked in the next cubicle to Winston was between them. The girl with dark hair was sitting immediately behind. The next moment, a hideous grinding speech, as of some monstrous machine running without oil, burst from the big telescreen at the end of the room. It was a noise that set one's teeth on edge and bristled the hair at the back of one's neck. The hate had started. As usual, the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people, had flashed onto the screen. There were hisses here and there among the audience. The little sandy-haired woman gave a squeak of mingled fear and disgust. Goldstein was the renegade and backslider who once, long ago, how long ago, nobody quite remembered, had been one of the leading figures of the party, almost on a level with Big Brother himself, and then had engaged in counter-revolutionary activities, had been condemned to death, and had mysteriously escaped and disappeared. The program of the 2 minutes hate varied from day to day, but there was none in which Goldstein was not the principal figure. He was the primal traitor, the earliest defiler of the party's purity. All subsequent crimes against the party, all treacheries, acts of sabotage, heresies, deviations, sprang directly out of his teaching. Somewhere or other he was still alive and hatching his conspiracies, perhaps somewhere beyond the sea under the protection of his foreign paymasters. Perhaps even, so it was occasionally rumored, in some hiding place in Oceania itself. Oceania. It would just be Oceania, right? You overpronounce it when it has that on there, right? Whatever. Winston's diaphragm was constricted. He could never see the face of Goldstein without a painful mixture of emotions. It was a lean, Jewish face with a great fuzzy aureole of white hair. I don't know, some fancy, he had a skunk boy haircut of white hair and a small goatee beard. A clever face, and yet somehow inherently despicable, with a kind of senile silliness in the long thin nose near the end of which a pair of spectacles was perched. With a kind of senile silliness in the long thin nose near the end of which a pair of spectacles, silliness in the long thin nose near the end of which a pair of spectacles was perched. With a kind of senile silliness. Alright, so you'd be, what do we do here? Silliness. Yeah, what's this, page 13? In the long, thin nose. This is mostly a cadence. It could be anti-Semitic to practice saying this out loud over and over, so whatever. In the long, thin nose, near the end of which a pair of spectacles was perched. In the long, thin nose, near the end of a pair of spectacles was perched. Near the end of which a pair of spectacular speckled spectacles, near smelly trash receptacles, Coles was perched. And then on something that you're using just for a cadence, try to take a word that you hardly ever use out of it. So like perched would be good. Like a parched perch. And then you got your dumb, everyone's still fishing, right? Alright, parched perch, dun 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 dun. It resembled the face of a sheep, and the voice too had a sheep-like quality. Goldstein was delivering his usual venomous attack upon the doctrines of the party, an attack so exaggerated and perverse that a child should not have been able to see through. A child should have been able to see through it, and yet just plausible enough to fill one with an alarm feeling that other people less level-headed than oneself might be taken in by it. He was abusing Big Brother. He was denouncing the dictatorship of the party. He was demanding the immediate conclusion of peace with Eurasia. He was advocating freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought. He was crying hysterically that the revolution had been betrayed. And all this in rapid polysyllabic speech was what? Alright, and all this in rapid polysyllabic speech. Rapid polysyllabic speech was a sort of parody of the habitual style of the orators of the party. Polysyllabic speech, which was sort of a parody of the habitual style of the orators of the party, and even contained new-speak words more new-speak words indeed than. Yeah, so that kind of goes with itself there. So we'll do, what is this? Rapid polysyllabic speech. Rapid polysyllabic speech. Rapid polysyllabic speech. $0.50 now should buy me more than a coffee. Let's see. Polysyllabic speech, which was a sort of parody of the habitual style of the orators of the party. Of the habitual style of the orators of the party. Of the habitual style. Where's the habitual style of the orators of the party? Of the orators of the party. Alright. It even contained newspeak words, more newspeak words indeed than any party member would normally use in real life, and all the while lest one should be in any doubt as to the reality which Goldstein's specious claptrap covered. Behind his head on the telescreen there marched the endless columns of the Eurasian army. Row after row of solid-looking men with expressionless Asiatic faces who swam up to the surface of the screen and vanished, to be replaced by others exactly similar. The dull rhythmic tramp of the soldiers' boots formed the background to Goldstein's bleeding voice. Before the hate had proceeded for 30 seconds, uncontrollable exclamations of rage were breaking out from half the people in the room. So we've got, oh my gosh, 17 pages is long. I don't want to do any more ADD reading. The self-satisfied sheep-like face on the screen, the terrifying power of the Eurasian army behind him, were too much to be borne. Besides, the sight or even the thought of Goldstein produced fear and anger automatically. He was an object of hatred more constant than either Eurasia or East Asia, since when Oceania was at war, and one of these powers, it was generally at peace with the other. But what was strange was that although Goldstein was hated and despised by everybody, although every day and 1,000 times a day on platforms, on the telescreen, in newspapers and books, his theories were refuted, smashed, and ridiculed, held up to the general gaze for the pitiful rubbish that they were. In spite of all this, his influence never seemed to grow less. Always there were fresh dupes waiting to be seduced by him. A day never passed when spies and saboteurs acting under his directions were not unmasked by the thought police. He was the commander of a vast shadowy army, an underground network of the conspirators dedicated to the overthrow of the state. The Big Brotherhood, or the Brotherhood, its name was supposed to be. There were also whispered stories of a terrible book, a compendium of all the heresies of which Goldstein was the author, and which circulated clandestinely here and there. It was a book without a title. People referred to it, if at all, simply as the book, but no one knew of such things, only through vague rumors. Neither the Brotherhood nor the book was the subject that any ordinary party member would mention if there was a way of avoiding it. In its second minute, the hate rose to a frenzy. People were leaping up and down in their places, shouting at the tops of their voices in an effort to drown the maddening, bleeding voice that came from the screen. The little sandy-haired woman had turned bright pink, and her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. Her mouth was opening and shutting like the so to her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. Her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. Like that of a landed fish. How many chapters are there? We just split the whole thing up. What is this? So it'll take all. Oh no, there's multiple parts. So chapter 6 of what part? 3 parts. Her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. Let's see. Even O'Brien's heavy face was flushed. He was sitting very straight in his chair, his powerful chest swelling and quivering as though he were standing up to the assault of a wave. The dark-haired girl behind Winston had begun crying out, "Swine! Swine! Swine!" And suddenly she picked up a heavy Newspeak dictionary and flung it at the screen. It struck Goldstein's nose and bounced off. The voice continued inexorably. In a lucid moment, Winston found that he was shouting with the others, and kicked his heels violently against the rung of his chair. The horrible thing about the 2 minutes' hate was not that one was obliged to act a part, but that it was impossible to avoid joining in. Let's see. About 30 seconds, any pretense was always within 30 seconds, any pretense was always unnecessary. A hideous ecstasy of fear and vindictiveness, a desire to kill, to torture, to smash faces in with a sledgehammer, seemed to flow through the whole group of people like an electric current, turning one, even against one's will, into a grimacing, screaming lunatic. And yet the rage that one felt was an abstract, undirected emotion which could be switched from one object to another like the flame of a blow lamp. Thus, at one moment, Winston's hatred was not turned against Goldstein at all, but on the contrary against Big Brother, the party, and the thought police. At such moments, in his heart went out to the lonely, derided heretic on the screen, sole guardian of truth and sanity in a world of lies. Alright, charge number 1. just gonna write it down for now. What was it, 60% of the time? It works 100% of the time. If your girlfriend gets you into a church pew 60% of the time, she might be singing about you, or to you. And that's charge number one. Alright, let's see. Big Brother the Party Thought Police. So, in the 10 minutes of hate, Winston is writing the emotion, but directing everything against the thing that caused the problem to begin with. So, Big Brother the Party and the Thought Police. And the reason why stupid love songs proliferate in church is because they have nothing to do with theology, and they have everything to do with tricking a boy into marrying them. But that's like, yeah. Martin Luther would buy me a beer if I decided to go off on a tangent on this. Alright, and yet the very next instant he was at one with the people about him, and all that was said of Goldstein seemed to him to be true. Well, if you, like, let's say you don't disagree with the church that your parents go to, it would be a reasonably good use of your time if you did sing some of those songs for your spouse, just to keep the peace with mom and dad, because nobody wants to hear that they're in a cult. And at the very next instant, he was at one with the people around about him, and all that was said of Goldstein seemed to him to be true. At those moments, his secret loathing of Big Brother changed into adoration, and Big Brother seemed to tower up, an invincible, fearless protector, standing like a rock against the hordes of Asia. And Goldstein, in spite of his isolation, his helplessness, and the doubt that hung about his very existence, seemed like some sinister enchanter, capable by the mere power of his voice of wrecking the structure of civilization. It was even possible at moments to switch one's hatred this way or that by a voluntary act, suddenly by the sort of violent effort with which one wrenches one's head away from the pillow in a nightmare. Winston succeeded in transferring his hatred from the face on the screen to the dark-haired girl behind him. Vivid, beautiful hallucinations flashed through his mind. He would flog her to death with a rubber truncheon. He would tie her naked to a stake and shoot her full of arrows like Saint Sebastian. He would ravish her and cut her throat at the moment of climax. Better than before. Moreover, he realized why it was that he hated her. He hated her because she was young and pretty and sexless. Because he wanted to go to bed with her and would never do so, because round her sweet supple waist, which seemed to ask you to encircle it with your arm, there was only the odious scarlet sash, aggressive symbol of chastity. Do they have a picture of Orwell? What's his nose look like? Alright. Writing like an absolute double agent right here. Alright, he hated her more because of the hate rose to its climax. The voice of Goldstein had become an actual sheep's bleat, and for an instant the face changed into that of a sheep. Then the sheep face melted into the figure of a Eurasian soldier who seemed to be advancing, huge and terrible, his submachine gun roaring and seeming to spring out of the surface of the screen so that some of the people in the front row actually flinched backwards in their seats. But in the same moment, drawing a deep sigh of relief from everybody, the hostile figure melted into the face of Big Brother, black-haired, black-mustachioed, full of power and mysterious calm, and so vast that it almost filled up the screen. Nobody heard what Big Brother was saying. It was merely a few words of encouragement, the sort of words that are uttered in the din of battle, not distinguishable individually, but restoring confidence by the fact of being spoken. And the face of Big Brother faded away again. And instead, the three slogans of the party stood out in bold capitals: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. But the face of Big Brother seemed to persist for several seconds on the screen, as though the impact that it had made on everyone's eyeballs was too vivid to wear off immediately. The little sandy-haired woman had flung herself forward over the back of the chair in front of her. With a tremulous murmur that sounded like, "My Savior," she extended her arms towards the screen. Then she buried her face in her hands. It was apparent that she was uttering a prayer. At this moment, the entire group of people broke into a deep, slow, rhythmic chant of B, 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 very slowly with a long pause between the first B and the second. A heavy murmurous sound, somehow curiously savage, in the background of which one seemed to hear the stamp of naked feet and the throbbing of tom-toms. For perhaps as much as 30 seconds they kept it up. It was a refrain that was often heard in moments of overwhelming emotion. Partly it was a sort of hymn to the wisdom and majesty of Big Brother, but still more it was an act of self-hypnosis, a deliberate drowning of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. I only bring up the first charge because that's mostly what Western music is. It's just willing self-hypnosis for anything that is in your current situation. So pardon my reticence on just writing and releasing things as fast as I could write them, even if I don't believe in them. But still more, it was an act of self-hypnosis, a deliberate drowning of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. Winston's entrails seemed to grow cold. In the 2 minutes' hate, he could not help sharing in the general delirium, but this subhuman chanting of B, 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 B always filled him with horror. Of course, he chanted with the rest. It was impossible to do otherwise. To dissemble your feelings, to control your face, to do what everyone else was doing was an instinctive reaction, but there was a space of a couple seconds. During which the expression in his eyes might conceivably have betrayed him, and it was exactly at this moment that the significant thing happened, if indeed it did happen. Momentarily, it caught O'Brien's eye. O'Brien had stood up. He had taken off his spectacles and was in the act of resettling them on his nose with his characteristic gesture. But there was a fraction of a second when their eyes met, and for as long as it took to happen, Winston knew, yes, he knew, that O'Brien was thinking the same thing as himself. An unmistakable message had passed. It was as though their two minds had opened, and the thoughts were flowing from one to the other through their eyes. "I am with you," O'Brien seemed to be saying to him. "I know precisely what you're feeling. I know all about your contempt, your hatred, your disgust, but don't worry, I'm on your side." And then the flash of intelligence was gone, and O'Brien's face was as inscrutable as everybody else's. That was all, and he was already uncertain whether it had happened. Such incidents never had any sequel. All that they did was to keep him alive in the belief or hope that others beside himself were the enemies of the party. Perhaps the rumors of vast underground conspiracies were true after all. Perhaps the Brotherhood really existed. It was impossible, in spite of the endless arrests and confessions and executions, to be sure that the Brotherhood was not simply a myth. Some days he believed in it, some days not. There was no evidence, only fleeting glimpses that might mean anything or nothing, snatches of overhead conversation, faint scribbles on lavatory walls. Once, even when two strangers met, a small movement of the hands which had looked as though it might be a signal of recognition. It was all guesswork. Very likely he had imagined everything. He had gone back to his cubicle without looking at O'Brien again. The idea of following up their momentary contact hardly crossed his mind. It would have been inconceivably dangerous, even if he had known how to set about doing it. For a second, 2 seconds, they had exchanged an equivocal glance, and that was the end of the story. But even that was a memorable event in the locked loneliness in which one had to live. Winston roused himself and sat up straighter. He let out a belch. The gin was rising from his stomach. His eyes refocused on the page. He discovered that while he sat helplessly, his eyes refocused on the page. He discovered that while he sat helplessly musing, that he had also been writing as though by automatic action. And it was no longer the same cramped, awkward handwriting as before. The pen had slid voluptuously over the smooth paper. His yeah, just like while the offering music is going on at church, just whisper this in their ear. His pen had slid voluptuously. And if he laughs, he has to buy you lunch. Voluptuously over the smooth paper. Let's see. This is for getting cute church boys out of the friend zone. Because you're like, I ain't putting more time in with no other dummy. His pen had slid voluptuously over the smooth paper, printing in large his pen printing in large, neat. Yeah, you're like, what's your boyfriend do? He's in large, neat, capital. He wears a Doge shirt 5 days straight before taking a shower. And then you go down with Big Brother. Yeah, but like when you're massaging his arm, you're just drawing ghost letters like down with Big Brother, treat me like woman. Over and over again, filling half a page. I don't know. I'm gonna try to teach the girls to burn down the entire shipyard if they don't get whatever they think they expect they deserve. Why don't you just tell me the name of the movie you want to watch? Over and over again, filling half a page. He could not help feeling a twinge of panic. It was absurd, since the writing of those particular words was not more dangerous than the initial act of opening the diary. But for a moment, he was tempted to tear out the spoiled pages and abandon the enterprise altogether. He did not do so, however, because he knew that it was useless. Whether he wrote down with Big Brother, or whether he refrained from writing, it made no difference. Whether he went on with the diary, or whether he did not go on with it, I don't even have to read another chapter ever again. This is going to cause some problems. Whether he did, I'm immediately tagging somebody else in for chapter 2, and then you go as far as you can with bad ideas. Whether he went on with the diary or whether he did not go on with it made no difference. The thought police would get him just the same. He had would still have committed, even if he had never set pen to paper, the essential crime that contained all others in itself. Thought crime, they called it. Thought crime was not a thing that could be concealed forever. You might dodge successfully for a while, even for years, but sooner or later they were bound to get you. It It was always at night. The arrest invariably happened at night. The sudden jerk out of sleep, the rough hand shaking in your shoulder, the lights glaring in your eyes, the ring of hard faces round the bed. In the vast majority of cases, there was no trial, no report of the arrest. People simply disappeared, always during the night. Your name was removed from the registers. Every record of everything you had ever done was wiped out. Your one-time existence was denied and then forgotten. You were abolished, annihilated, vaporized, as was the usual word. They say things like, "Where's Jeff?" I think Jeff got rearrested. I thought they called the arrest off. You know too much about Jeff. You're about to be arrested. What? You were abolished, annihilated, vaporized was the usual word. For a moment, he was seized by a kind of hysteria. He began writing in a hurried, untidy scrawl. "They'll shoot me. I don't care. They'll shoot me in the back of the neck. I don't care. Down with Big Brother. They always shoot you in the back of the neck. I don't care. Down with Big Brother." He sat back in his chair, slightly ashamed of himself, and laid down the pen. The next moment, he started violently, and there was a knocking at the door. "Already?" He said, as still as a mouse, in the futile hope that whoever it was might go away after a single attempt. But no, the knocking was repeated. The worst thing of all would be to delay. His heart was thumping like a drum, but his face, from long habit, was probably expressionless. He got up and moved heavily toward the door. Oh man, there's so many bad ideas. Just with chapter 1, will there be some sort of agreement that, we want 1984. Give us 1984. I was like, keep talking crap and leaving me in pain. I don't have the energy for 1984. What do you know how many bad ideas are in every paragraph? Alright, so Christian girl dating strategy can, put your best foot forward and go to a church that will force the guy to try to talk you out of going to a cult. While you're there, sing all of the songs that sound like they have nothing to do with a holy God, with mountains and mountains of theology, and just sing those songs as if you're singing to your boyfriend. Then he's going to pull up his britches and his bootstraps, and he's going to try to save you from the cult if you just, not knowing how to just ask somebody out yourself. Instead, you asked him to church because you're cowardly. But if a guy asks you, it's not cowardly. It's gross and disgusting. And he already asked if I wanted to get breakfast. And it's like, I don't think I should have to relocate anymore. I've chased you across the country only to have breakfast, implying that we go to church the night before, and not in any way that is modernly disgusting. Have to explain myself. Now you have to explain yourself. Way too many literal miles on this body. Not enough debauchery, so I don't want to be treated as if whatever. Is there? Oh, man. I forgot to ask more questions at the office. I'll figure it out. No. Alright, chapter 1, just the lyrics that don't seem to be worshiping God. They seem to be, I don't know, everybody's turning all the music into love songs. But like love songs that sound like you know nothing about the person. So that's what's weird about worship music. It's like, that's a catchy song. But it doesn't sound like it's, yeah, it doesn't sound like something you'd write for somebody who like created the known world and everything in it. So just quietly sing those parts to your boyfriend or girlfriend until you have time to go shopping for a better church, I guess. Yeah, like the guy that like toppled the walls of Jericho. You're acting like you're walking down the street sharing some mozzarella sticks and eating a used piece of gum. Like that's not worship. That's silliness. What was it? Sloppy wet kiss. Yeah. That's probably the last thing I read in that email before I changed the password and got rid of it on purpose. Football to the groin. Football to the groin. Yeah, but even if like, dude, even a girl who goes to Dungeons and Dragons would get more out of this idea than the proposed alternatives. Like the state of most of the churches is that like, did they talk about Jesus, and did they talk about why he came, and did they talk about our sin and how it cannot remain, and did they talk about its blood spilled, and did they talk about the latest craze? Purpose-driven life should probably be thrown into an unsearchable maze, Minotaur in the center, with a dull axe because of how it behaves when heretics come to the Tootsie Pop middle. It's like, I don't have time for this. Yeah, you try telling 5 girls the word no at Red Robin and see what happened. They want old Mother Hubbard lived in a shoe, fished up by somebody who prefers the truth, and all the other fairy tales of what I would do if you followed breadcrumbs to the middle of the forest and now there's 50 genders. Yeah, no, I don't know what to say. All right. Yeah, you might want to not might want to not associate with like we're creating disorders just to keep the medical complex chugging forward. We've ran out of real problems, so now we are going to make inadequate and inoperable sexual organs out of forearm meat. Okay, man. really wish that I had just been silent rather than completely isolated and backed into a corner by people who already didn't like how often I said the word no. So I'll take a good amount of blame, but persecution isn't always openly in defiance of your beliefs. Sometimes they use the system because they know you'll say no about their behavior. Yeah, you want me to go Ray Finkel? Goldstein is Big Brother. Big Brother is Goldstein. He just Big Brother is Goldstein, just looking for his Mississippi queen. I'll never make it through this book again. Are you crazy? You should have been there the first few times I read it instead of driving from the back seat. Ugh. Goldstein, Ray Finkel, Finkel and Einhorn, Finkel and Einhorn. Misplaced hate in the 2 minute, what's it called? 2 minutes of hate? The hour of hate? Where is this at? 2 minutes hate. Alright, the 2 minutes hate. 2 minutes hate. If the euphoria of the hate was that huge. Well, I mean, he says, what is it? It's just the same thing as, this is the same thing as repeating, like, worship songs that never ever mention Christ or any other important theology. They have flowery words with no actual target. Or they're piggybacking off of, yeah, we're in uncharted territory here, so you'd be piggybacking off of, like, the most simplistic, like something as repetitive as hallelujah. Well, that's fine and all, but it's like who's being glorified in that moment if very rarely you're actually going through the exegesis of scripture, like, because even that word can be sung in vain after a while. But you've got partly it was a sort of hymn to the wisdom and majesty of Big Brother, but still more it was an act of self-hypnosis, a deliberate drowning of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. The 2 minutes of hate is at least deliberately saying it's only 2 minutes long, but it's long enough for people to get worked up about a perceived individual or idea to the point of absolute madness. Let's see, self-hypnosis, deliberate drowning of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. So did I write that on this page or the other one? A long thin nose near the end of which a pair of spectacles was perched. Rapid polysyllabic speech, which was a sort of parody. I don't think I wrote it down. Yeah. is it page 17? The main reason I stick on that specifically is there's a whole lot in the Western world that is treated like mantras and repetitious, like utterances to control the masses. That it's like it's not just the church that comes under the should come under the microscope. It's other places should come under the microscope of like, yeah, like just. I mean, that's why like that's the strong opinion I have about hip hop is you're taking these things that are in general kind of shallow and you're repeating them over and over and over. And it's like, so for what purpose are you doing it? Now you can spend 5 or 6 years as an artist, like working on your credibility with the urban community. But after a few albums, you should be like diverging towards fixing the problem that you have enough money to perceive the problem on a level that a white person like me couldn't. So like your lyrics should start to reflect like an actual like, all right, changing of the guard. Yeah, you're like, I got enough green in my trunk. Now let's say something for real. Instead, it's like it just sounds like left, right, marching to the drum of those who we can't mention by name or by the way they appear in sight, in fright. They delight in keeping the man not just the black but the white in a low place. Chameleons, blah blah blah. Yeah. Imposters. Zombies. Zombie creating money loners. Not always figurative the way I swing my boner. Talking mistakes and axe wielding loner. Blah 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 blah. Alright. Secondary objective. Try to turn George Orwell into a rapper. Orwell's just, those, what is the lo-fi anime hip-hop screensaver with the cat and the kid studying and with the afro. But it's just George Orwell figuring out how to not sound so uptight. I'm going to go on the internet, and one day I'm going to think he's controlled opposition, and then the other day I'm going to think it's the dumbest book that was ever written, ever. You can't just like a book. It's like only 300 pages. It's like one day. If you don't like the book, you never have to talk about the book ever again. Goldstein, Ray, Finkel, and Einhorn. That could be fun. Well, because the book doesn't go anywhere. The book is these two let their lust and their self-hatred keep them from finding out what the heck is really going on. So like, I'm gonna go to this park and have sex. And it's like, okay. But you didn't figure anything out. And all the problems that are highlighted, it's like, man, we were rolling around in the bushes. We didn't have time to figure out what was really going on with Big Brother. Tell me what you really think about 1984. So this all started with, I was like, the other day, I was like, all right, if I start this, and you don't start working on, he hasn't finished Drake, he hasn't finished Gilmore Girls. Why am I going to finish Gilmore Girls? Five seasons in, now I don't respect anybody. I don't respect Lorelai. I don't respect Lorelai Jr. Paris's own pride has put her in the arms of a writer who might be smart and whatever, but he's a rock star at like age 70 who can just pull some random girl at college. So you probably don't want me going to college after 50, that's for sure. Like, alright, so Rory only takes advice from the girl who's Asian, who has a mother who is way too clamped down on not just like on everything. She's so traditional, but she also runs a retail store in the modern age, this side of the ocean, which whatever, I don't even want to get into that. So the only person she takes advice from is the Asian that's fighting so hard against any form of discipline whatsoever. And she only listens to her because they kind of like the same music, and the music is going to be the further dumbing down of what kind of choices Rory's going to make. So Rory's brain is turning into mush right in front of everybody because she wants the validation from the Asian girl that's throwing away every tangible act of love from her Korean mother. This is already a horrible problem, and then you have what Paris. Paris is competitive. Paris is all this other things, but Paris won't share her notes. So Paris, like in your little fanfic, Paris has figured out time travel, and that's why her notes cannot be. I mean, why the heck am I running into her in Spokane anyway on a bicycle? She's not allowed to come within 30 feet. That seems pretty bizarre tactics if you ask me. Like, why didn't you finish watching all the DVDs? I was like, because I have a problem with everyone's character in the show. Like, I get up from the thing and I'm like, I'm not excited about the next way you're going to ruin your life. There's enough girls in the real world ruining their lives every day. So, do a fanfic. And Paris's notes are time travel, and she's not allowed to cut me. It's just like I already did the Club Elaine for your dumb Gilmore Girls now. I'm like, I don't care. Like, just have like 5 or 6 scripts sitting there. No, somebody steal the ideas. You write the script. I'm not writing nothing for this thick-headed psychopath. Then when disclosure comes, you're like, oh, actually, he did care. Oh, he might have been in pain. I'm not watching the rest of that thing. There's no happy ending unless you do a fanfic where, like, Paris's notes have time travel and all the girls learn to be content instead of chasing everyone's validation all the way through college. And there's not one good role model in the entire show. Yikes. Well, who the hell would move to Connecticut with those odds? Yeah, and then the funny thing would be, like, everyone reprises their roles that's alive except for Rory. They find a girl that's objectively cuter in just about everyone's eyes after a voting sequence, and younger. And she has to serve coffee until somebody rescues her. Like a good girl who isn't wasting her time going to Harvard just to experience how incredibly cruel rich people can be. Like, what do you want? You write something for once. Quit picking on me. show. What awful people. You tricked me into watching how many seasons of that trash? Paris is like, she's like a TV version of Sam Mathern dating the horrible choice just to get a reaction from the boys she really wants to talk to. It's like, I don't play that game. Plus riff raff, street rat, yada yada yada, high five that. Jane Withersteen, the child, is a Gentile. Well, you could have fooled me with your love for Israel and that last name. Oh no. This is a Mormon Western? Oh my god. Oh. How many prestige levels do I have? This is becoming tiring. It's Maureen Brown's corner. Maureen and me used to hang out back when I was a hoe. She wasn't as good a hoe as me. She wasn't no skank hoe either. Alright, we'll figure that out in due time. Disoriented fart.